at 5 a.m. because you will watch that video closely.
What a coinkydink. What a coincidence. One. Did you see that gesture, that confident gesture? Unbelievable. This is such a good opening. It's a pleasure to watch David work. The first words out of his mouth, Karen Reed was framed. Why would they be making long-term plans for months or years into the future? Just go from everything is fine to well, hello everybody, and welcome back to your favorite show on the internet, Raw Law Unfiltered, with your favorite host, the DUI Guy. Plus, today we are going to conclude David Yannetti's opening statement in the Karen Reed murder trial. Again, don't forget, every day, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, new video on this channel every day. Let's go.
Going back to that 5 a.m. video from John's driveway, you will see Karen back up her Lexus and strike John's car at about 5 a.m. when she was leaving John's house to go out to look for him. And you will know that she struck his car at 5 a.m. because you will watch that video closely.
Remember, in the previous video, this is where we left off. You will watch that video closely. The embedded command by David Yannetti. You will know what happened because you will watch that video closely. Their minds are going to remember that. Let's pick up where we left off.
You will witness that the wheels and the hubcaps on John's car are jostled and moved by Karen's SUV. And you will conclude that that video depicts exactly when Karen's taillight was cracked, long after she dropped off John at night at 34 Fairview. And you will learn that part of the reason that Karen's Lexus hit John's car was that Karen was panicked at that time. Where is John? Why didn't he come home? What happened to him?
She was frantic.
And you will learn that she was racking her brain for what possibly could have happened. And like many of us, was worried about the worst. Did I hit him? Could I have hit him? That was what she was saying, both to herself and to other people later that morning when she went back to 34 Fairview. She couldn't think of anything else that made sense. She certainly didn't consider in a million years that someone from within the Albert home could have beaten up John and left him to die on the front lawn. Now, that was over 2 years ago. Karen didn't know then what you will learn during this trial. Karen didn't know that Brian Albert's sister-in-law, Jennifer McCabe, left the after-hours party at Brian Albert's house sometime after Karen pulled away. She didn't know that after Jennifer McCabe dropped off some people elsewhere, she returned to her own home. Karen didn't know that Jennifer McCabe climbed some stairs in her home and eventually made it into her bedroom with her cell phone. Karen didn't know that Jennifer McCabe settled in at 2:27 in the morning on January 29, 2022, and typed a Google search that she would later delete.
Ah, yes, the big
2:27
one.
in the morning was over
Listen to
3
this.
hours before John O'Keefe's body was found on Brian Albert's lawn. 2:27 was over 3 hours before anyone knew or suspected that John O'Keefe was missing or hurt or in trouble. And at 2:27 in the morning, you will learn that with no one watching her, thinking she was alone with her thoughts, not worrying that anyone would know what she was doing, Jennifer McCabe typed in the following Google search: how long to die in the cold?
Watch how he's scanning the jurors. He's talking to all of them at once. Very important. This is good defense work. This is good opening technique. This is how you do it, folks. She Googled how long to die in the cold. I do this all the time in my own cross-examinations and my own opening statements when I'm talking to the jurors, because I want them all individually to see my eyes as I speak, and for me to catch their gaze and to see if they're engaged, to keep them engaged. Very, very important.
Now, she misspelled the first word, so the actual search was how long to die in the cold, but you'll get the point. You will ask yourself, why would somebody Google how long does it take for someone to die in the cold? Unless that person knew someone who either was in that situation or would be in that situation. You will question during this trial, who was it who actually did die in the cold at some point that night, sometime after Jen McCabe was asking Google for an answer to her question. And you'll learn that the answer to that question is John O'Keefe. The medical examiner in this case will testify that one of the causes of John O'Keefe's death was hypothermia. John O'Keefe died in part because he was left to die in the cold.
Hypothermia, by the way, being the cause of death, discredits everything the prosecution is about to say, that she hit him with her car. It's very important for David Yannetti to point that out to the jurors at this juncture of the opening statement, because it kind of answers the question. So what did kill him? Oh, hypothermia. And you're about to find out what else killed him.
Now, the Commonwealth will try to dispute the timing of that Google search. They'll try to claim that there were only 2 Google searches at 6:23 and 6:24 a.m. after John's body was found. But one problem for the Commonwealth will be that we have retained Richard Green, one of the leading computer forensic experts in the country. Rick Green has forensically analyzed Jennifer McCabe's phone, both manually and using every appropriate type of computer software to solve this issue. Rick Green will confirm for you that Jennifer McCabe did indeed make that search at 2:27 a.m. And another problem for the Commonwealth is that you will hear and see other evidence that will confirm that Jennifer McCabe is lying when she denies making that Google search at 2:27 a.m. You will conclude that before she went to bed, if she went...
Listen again, you will conclude. He keeps on peppering those embedded commands because this is what the evidence is unequivocally going to show. Unlike Lally, just had a total mess, whereas Yannetti has his eye on the ball. You will conclude based on everything you're going to see. There is no other possible option for you to conclude other than what I'm telling you.
To bed that night. Jennifer McCabe wanted to know just how long it would take for someone to die in the cold. And a big question in this trial for you will be, when was John O'Keefe left to die in the cold? I expect the Commonwealth will try to persuade you that he was left there sometime around 12:30 a.m. because they're going to try to prove to you that Karen Reed hit him and that his body stayed there the entire night until first responders arrived at 6 a.m. and his body was taken to the hospital. But you will learn that there are big problems with the Commonwealth's theory of this case. You will learn that there were 6 people at that after-hours party at Brian Albert's house, all of whom left by the front door and would have been confronted by John O'Keefe's lifeless body on that lawn if he was actually there at that time. Those 6 people walked out the front door to 34 Fairview, walked to their cars, either in the driveway or parked in front of the house.
It's very important to note the fact that there was a party in the first place, that there were people around. How would they not have heard a car smashing into a person? Look out the window like, hey, did you hear that? Hey, did you see that? How is that even possible? He's planting the doubt that they're going to use when they go back to deliberate. That is how you do an opening, folks. It's a masterclass, an absolute masterclass on how to do an opening in a criminal defense case when you have a alleged murder on your hands. This is just beautiful. Makes a defense lawyer like myself weep.
Brian Albert's sister-in-law, Jennifer McCabe, was there. Her husband, Matthew McCabe, was there. ATF federal agent Brian Higgins was there, who was also Brian Albert's friend. Sarah Levinson, a friend of Brian Albert Jr., was there. Julie Nagel, another friend of Brian Albert Jr., was there. And Caitlin Albert, Brian Albert's daughter, was also there. All of them leaving the residence. Each of those people left 34 Fairview in Canton, where Brian Albert lived. Each of them walked out facing the front lawn, where the Commonwealth will tell you that a 6'2", nearly 220-pound big man in dark clothing was sprawled on the front lawn when there was only a dusting of white snow on the ground. He was supposedly sprawled on that lawn, just feet from where these people were walking when they left the residence. And you will learn that not one of these people saw John O'Keefe laying. Not one. And you know,
Notice the emphasis. Not one of these people have noticed. What a coinkydink. What a coincidence. And then he re-emphasizes, not one. Did you see that gesture, the confident gesture? Unbelievable. This is such a good opening. It's a pleasure to watch David work.
Who else saw no one laying outside in the early morning hours of January 29th? The snowplow driver in charge of plowing the street for the city of Canton. And this is another big problem for the Commonwealth. You will learn that Michael Proctor, here's that name again, wrote a report where he claimed that the DPW supervisor had told him that Fairview Road had not been plowed that night. Proctor's total investigation on this issue consisted of one phone call and no follow-up. He just submitted his report that simply said the road hadn't been plowed that night, and perhaps thinking that no one else would follow up either. But you'll learn that when it came to finding out the truth, it's not that Proctor couldn't find the truth, it's that he wouldn't.
Because he didn't care.
But fortunately, you'll learn that we would.
See, I'm
And
following
we
him.
did. You'll learn that within weeks after January 29th, we sent our investigator, a former Medford police officer named Paul Makowski, to the Canton DPW to try to get to the bottom of this. Paul Makowski talked to the same supervisor at the DPW, a man named Michael Trotta, whom Proctor claimed had told him that the street hadn't been plowed that night. You'll learn that Paul Makowski found out that Michael Proctor was not telling the truth. You'll learn that Michael Trotta from the DPW told Paul Makowski, our investigator, that the street was indeed plowed that night, and that the name of the plow driver was Brian Laughlin. So Paul Makowski tracked down Brian Laughlin. He asked Mr. Laughlin if the state police or any investigators had ever spoken to him. And the answer came back, no.
Now that's powerful. The one person who could have potentially stumbled upon the body was never questioned by investigators? Think about that for a minute, folks. Think about that. If you're truly trying to conduct an honest investigation, you will turn over every rock and talk to every witness, unless you're trying to cover something up. If you're trying to cover something up, you're going to cut corners. You're going to miss key witnesses. You're going to ignore evidence. And that's the kind of picture that David Yannetti is painting for the jurors.
You will then learn what Brian Laughlin had to say about what he saw and didn't see that night, and you will be shocked.
He doesn't even have to say it. They already got it.
Brian Laughlin told Paul Makowski that he was driving a big snowplow in Canton that night. You'll learn that the nickname for it at the DPW was Frankenstein, because it had a lot of spare parts and it had been around forever. Brian Laughlin told Paul Makowski that when he plows the streets of Canton in Frankenstein, he's very careful. He makes sure to check not only the roads in front of him, but also the yards to the side of his plow. He makes sure not to hit a fire hydrant or a tree or an animal, or heaven forbid, a person lying in the snow. He's always on the lookout. You'll learn that Brian Laughlin passed by 34 Fairview in his plow, traveling right by Brian Albert's front lawn at 2:30 in the morning. You'll learn that Brian Laughlin confirms that at about 2:30, when he went by that house, John O'Keefe was not on that front lawn. So you'll learn that about 2 hours after the Commonwealth claims that Karen Reed somehow incapacitated John O'Keefe, an eyewitness confirms that not only could it not have happened, but it didn't happen.
And that, in the jurors' minds, is probably going to answer the question why the snowplow driver was never interviewed by the government, by the police, because they were in on it. It's a cover-up job. Karen Reed was framed. Again, every word out of his mouth, notice, comes back to the theme. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you need to watch the first part of me dissecting David Yannetti's opening. Karen Reed was framed were the first 4 words out of his mouth. And everything he said after that leads to only one direction. This is why. This is how. This is what. This is when. Everything comes back to Karen Reed was framed. They didn't look at evidence. They ignored key witnesses. They planted evidence. They didn't do this. They did do that. They didn't look into this. They didn't look into that. It's just beautiful.
But you'll learn that Brian Loughran also provides some other troubling testimony for the Commonwealth. You'll learn that after making that pass at 2:30 in the morning and seeing no body, he showed up again at the entrance to Fairview Road, intending to make another pass down it with his plow. This time, however, at about 3:30 in the morning, he looked down the street and he saw that parked right next to Brian Albert's front lawn, right in the very area where John O'Keefe's body was later found at 6 a.m., Brian Loughran saw a Ford Edge parked on the side of the road. You will learn that the police have done zero investigation to discover whose Ford Edge that was. You'll learn that members of the Albert family drove Ford Edges. You'll learn that the police to this day claim not to know who was parked right next to the area where John O'Keefe's body was later found. You'll learn that while investigators on this case, including Michael Proctor, completely ignored the snowplow driver who went right by the Albert residence, the defense not only tracked him down and interviewed him, but the plow driver actually took our investigator on a ride back past the residence to explain the precise route that he had taken on January 29th. You'll learn that some other curious things were going on in the early morning hours of January 29th. Curious things that the police in this case utterly failed to investigate. For example, after people left the after-hours party at Brian Albert's house on January 29, Brian Albert claimed that he had no contact with anyone but his wife until he was woken up in the morning. But you will learn that he was ultimately confronted by the fact that his phone records revealed that he had actually placed a phone call to ATF agent Brian Higgins, his friend, the same friend who had been at his house earlier that night. And that was at 2:22 in the morning. You'll learn that Brian Higgins called him back 17 seconds later, and they connected for 22 seconds on their cell phones. You'll be asked to consider just how long 22 seconds is and what could be said and discussed during that long of a phone call. You will consider that phone call in the context of the other curious things that were going on during the early morning hours of January 29th. You will learn about the following in chronological order. 2:12 a.m., Jennifer McCabe arrives at her home. 2:22 a.m., Brian Albert calls Brian Higgins.
Yannetti is going chronologically. He's going very succinctly, directly, openly. It's beautiful.
2:22 a.m., 17 seconds later, Higgins calls him back, and Brian Albert and Brian Higgins are on the phone together for 22 seconds. 2:23 a.m., Jennifer McCabe climbs the stairs to her bedroom. 2:27 a.m., Jennifer McCabe searches on Google how long to die in the cold.
The timeline just makes sense. There you go.
2:30 a.m., plow driver Brian Loughran confirms there was no body on Brian Albert's front lawn. 3:30 a.m., Brian Loughran confirms that a Ford Edge was parked right where John O'Keefe's body was later found. The Commonwealth will not be able to successfully dispute any of those facts, yet I expect that they will persist in asking you to convict Karen Reed anyway. You will learn that there are other major problems with the Commonwealth's theory. You'll learn that when John O'Keefe was found, he did not look like he had been hit by a car. You'll learn that he looked to have been attacked and beaten up.
So if it wasn't Karen, right? We've listened to 30 minutes of if it wasn't Karen. Now we want to hear in the last 10 minutes of his opening, if not her, then who?
Learn that John O'Keefe was a large 6'2" man who, if positioned behind a Lexus SUV, would have had his torso completely exposed to the rear of that vehicle, including to the taillight.
So the damage to the vehicle and the damage to his body would be consistent with a car accident.
You'll learn that no part of his torso was injured.
There it is.
There was no bruising, no ridges, no scratches, no punctures. You'll learn that his chest and hips and legs were pristine, despite the Commonwealth's contention that he was hit by a 6,000-pound vehicle.
6,000.
The evidence will show that what was not pristine was his right arm. You will take one look at that arm, and you will conclude that a car did not cause those injuries. The injuries to John O'Keefe's arm appear to be consistent with scratch marks and claw marks, marks that make it look as though an animal had attacked his arm. But you won't have to rely just on your common sense when you look at those photos. You'll hear from an expert forensic pathologist who is world-renowned, who has personally conducted thousands of autopsies. And he will testify that those marks are consistent with scratch and claw marks and bite marks from an animal, including a German Shepherd.
And look at that body language. That is of an animal, a German Shepherd, a dog, and of course he's priming the jurors for when the evidence does come in of John O'Keefe, may he rest in peace, deceased's body. They will look at it and go, yeah, those are teeth marks. That's not a car. A car would leave a bruise, not deep lacerations and indentations. I'm still shocked this case made it this far. Well, corruption. I'm not shocked at all, actually. I want to be shocked, but I can't be, because it's all BS. It's all part of the cover-up of the true killers who are part of the same police force.
You'll learn that on January 29th of 2022, Brian Albert's family dog, Chloe, was a German Shepherd. You'll learn that Brian Albert has admitted that this dog is not good around strangers. You'll learn that on January 29th of 2022, John O'Keefe would have been a stranger to that dog. And you'll learn that Chloe had been the beloved family dog for the Alberts for 7 years. The Albert family loved Chloe. But strangely, as we discuss this dog today, the Albert family doesn't have its beloved
They
Chloe
loved the dog
anymore.
so much it's gone now.
You'll learn that Brian Albert was called to testify before the grand jury regarding this matter in April of 2022, and that he did testify about his German Shepherd, Chloe, during that grand jury testimony. And you'll learn that not long after that testimony, Brian Albert and his family rehomed their beloved family dog.
Rehomed.
They gave away their
Put
family
her down.
dog.
Put her down.
Chloe, the German Shepherd, is therefore now gone.
These people are heartless.
Now, the Commonwealth will try to take your attention away from all of these troubling facts and try to persuade you not to consider their shocking lack of investigation of anyone else.
Again, notice the choice of words, the shocking lack of investigation. This will shock you. Staggering, unbelievable. He is himself feeling these emotions, and he's making the jury feel how he feels. That's what you do in an opening. You feel them, and then you transfer the feeling onto the listener. And hopefully they catch on.
Not to consider John O'Keefe's injuries. Not to consider the fact that multiple people left the residence and saw no body. Not to consider the fact that the snowplow driver was specifically looking at 2:30 a.m. and there was no body there. Not to consider the fact that two people in the house were communicating at 2:22 a.m. but denied speaking to each other for 22 seconds. And not to consider the fact that one of their witnesses, who was also present at the home, was unusually curious at 2:27 a.m. about how long it would take for someone to die in the cold. Commonwealth will instead try to persuade you that Karen Reed supposedly had a motive to kill John O'Keefe because they were not getting along. You'll hear about their trip to Aruba over New Year's Eve and that Karen was upset that John had been flirting with another woman. And you will hear that Karen considered exploring her options after that trip which led her to a get-together at one point with ATF federal agent Brian Higgins, although that never went anywhere. But you'll also hear that in January of 2022, after the Aruba trip, and not long before January 28th and 29th, John O'Keefe was making long-term plans with Karen.
John making long-term plans with Karen is extremely important because that goes to motive. If Karen truly did decide, you know what, I'm going to kill this guy, why would they be making long-term plans for months or years into the future? That's why that is important. Let's keep going.
Including a family trip with her and the kids, and also another trip with Karen and another couple for months into the future.
Months into the future.
And you'll see video of how John and Karen
Motive.
were interacting on the night
There's
in
no
question.
motive.
You'll see for yourself how they looked at each other from the video at the waterfall that night. Nobody who saw them that night saw anything wrong. There was nothing wrong. I mean, like any couples, occasionally they would bicker or disagree. But you will hear zero evidence of any domestic violence in that home whatsoever. John never...
You don't just go from everything is fine to murder, you know. There's things that lead up to it. And it doesn't exist in this case. By telling the jurors that, they begin to question the motive. And if there's no motive, then there's no murder.
Raised a hand in anger toward Karen. And Karen never raised a hand in anger toward John. That simply wasn't who they are. You will conclude the notion that Karen Reed chose the start of a snowstorm to suddenly become violent out of the blue for the first time and intentionally kill her boyfriend by hitting him with her car and leaving him there with a house full of people inside is patently ridiculous. You will also learn that what's not ridiculous is that someone, not Karen Reed, ambushed John O'Keefe. Somebody probably didn't mean to kill him, but somebody went too far.
And that's been my theory of the case for the full, however long I've been involved in this case. I can't help but try and give myself a little bit of credit, maybe pat myself on the back. Maybe David Yannetti has been, fed some of the information that I myself have been sharing on the internet. Because that sounds exactly like my words. But maybe we just independently came to the same conclusion. I'm not saying anything. I'm not trying to toot my own horn a little too much here. But I believe nobody meant to kill him that night. I am convinced it was an accident. That the scuffle, the fight he got into with the Alberts and the McCabe's in the home, it just turned ugly and turned into an accidental murder. They didn't mean to kill him. And then once they did, they realized, well, we got to dump the body. Like, holy crap, what have we done? Well, we're cops. We're going to get cops to cover for us. And who's the fall guy? The girlfriend. We can pin it on the girlfriend and walk away. That's not how it works, folks. Can't do that. You can't do that to people.
You'll learn that Trooper Proctor failed to investigate motives that other people had to harm John O'Keefe. You'll learn that Proctor failed to investigate anything or anyone who was in the Albert residence that night. You'll learn that he failed to investigate the antagonistic relationship between members of the Albert family and John O'Keefe. You'll learn that apparently nobody investigates the Albert family of Canton. Remember, on day one, Trooper Proctor was asked whether the homeowner, Brian Albert, would catch a lot of grief. And Trooper Proctor himself said it. Nope.
Nope.
Homeowner's a Boston cop, too.
He's a cop, man. He's one of ours.
So, folks, the trial is now about to start, and the witnesses are about to start testifying. On behalf of Karen Reed, I ask that you do two things during this trial.
So now, before he sits down, he has just a couple things that he wants the jurors to do. He's giving them guidance. What is this guidance, David? Tell us what it is.
First,
number one,
I ask that you pay attention to all of the evidence.
All of it. Pay attention.
The way trials work, the prosecution gets to present its case first. They conduct their direct examinations first. So we respectfully ask that you wait for us. We will get to cross-examine their witnesses, and you will find that cross-examination is the key that unlocks the truth.
I love that statement. Basically, the prosecution is going to be doing all sorts of hoorah and hoop-ha and whatever, you will see that the cross-examination, meaning the defense, is going to unlock the truth for you. So the prosecution is going to put a lock, metaphorically speaking, to use David's own analogy. They're going to put a lock on the testimony of their witnesses, and we have the key, and we're going to unlock the truth for you. Oh, it's so powerful. It's so good.
Wait for us.
Wait for us.
You'll be glad that you did.
You'll be glad
Second,
that you did.
I ask that you keep your eye on the ball. You have one job and one job only to do during this trial.
Keep an eye on the ball.
Job, quite frankly, is not to solve this case. Your only job during this trial is
That
to
is
determine...
important. Your job is not to try and solve this case and figure out who the murderer is. It's solely to decide that Karen Reed is not it. Very important, because if that might be going, well, I don't know who the murderer is. I don't think it's Karen Reed, but just to be on the safe side, let's convict her. Don't do that.
whether the Commonwealth, the prosecution, has proven to you each and every element of the crimes they have charged, beyond a reasonable doubt, to a moral certainty. The prosecution...
Oh, I also like that. He added it a little bit more. Beyond a reasonable doubt to a moral certainty. I'm going to steal that. I'm going to use that. I'm writing that down. Beyond a reasonable doubt to a moral certainty. That is brilliant. Brilliant, I tell you.
will fail to prove this case to a moral certainty. They will fail to prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt. You will reasonably doubt their case because their theory of the case does not make sense.
You will doubt their case. That is such a powerful statement. It's not, there is enough here. No, you will doubt their case because their case does not make sense. I'm still shocked that this is going to trial.
You will reasonably doubt their case because Karen Reed was framed, and the evidence shows that.
Karen Reed was framed, and the evidence shows that. So he's bringing the theme back. Remember the first words out of his mouth. Karen Reed was framed. And here we are. We have about 30 seconds left of this opening statement, and he's repeating his theme. Very important. Karen Reed was framed, and now the evidence will show that. Bring on the evidence, Judge.
Despite the fact that the police never ever investigated that angle of this case at all. Because the prosecution will not prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt to a moral certainty, we will stand before you again at the end of this trial and ask that you find Karen Reed not guilty.
Wow, such a powerful, powerful opening. I mean, it's almost as though Clarence Darrow himself came down from the heavens and spoke through David Yanetti's mouth. Folks, I thank you all for joining me. I hope you learned something. Openings and Closings Masterclass. This brand new series that I've created pursuant to your votes. 95% said yes, 5% said no on 2 different platforms. Openings and Closings Masterclass. I'm going to be dissecting the greats, Clarence Darrow, O.J. Simpson trial. So Mark Furman's Cross, for example. The closing by Johnny Cochran. Johnny Depp trial. Like Ben Chu and Camille Vasquez's opening and closing. Karen Reed that we did, and of course when the closing comes. Kyle Rittenhouse. Somebody suggested Kyle Rittenhouse. So we're going to look at that. The Scopes trial, which is the Scopes monkey trial, of course, the biology professor, Clarence Darrow represented. We're going to look at all of those and throw some suggestions in the comments below which ones you want me to do next, because it's just incredible, folks. It's just incredible. There's so much stuff. I love to teach these things. So I hope you all learned something. I hope you all like the new series, the Openings and Closings Masterclass series. Don't forget to like this video, comment below, subscribe to the channel. This has been your favorite show on the internet, Raw Law Unfiltered, with your favorite host, the DUI Guy Plus, signing off. I love you guys. Bye, everybody.